The forest was older than memory. Its trees twisted like ancient hands, their branches forming a canopy so thick that sunlight fell in thin golden spears. Deep within this endless green, where no road led and no map dared to chart, stood a crumbling keep of moss-covered stone. It had once been a proud castle. Now it was a tomb for a king who refused to die. His name was Aldrich. They called him the Widow King. He had been young when the crown came to him, barely 20, with hair like raven wings and eyes the color of storm clouds. The kingdom he ruled was vast, rolling hills, silver rivers, and cities of white marble. But war had come like a plague. Armies from the south, hungry for land and gold, had burned everything in their path. His wife, Queen Elara, had ridden beside him on the last day of the battle. She wore armor of polished steel, her laughter ringing over the clash of swords. But when an arrow found her heart, she had fallen slowly, like a single leaf in autumn. Aldrich had caught her. He had held her until the last light left her eyes. Then he stood blood-soaked and silent as the last of his knights either fled or died around him. But Aldrich did not flee. He walked into the forest alone, carrying her body wrapped in his cloak. It was said the trees parted for him, as if they knew his grief. He buried her beneath the roots of the oldest oak, where the earth was soft and black. Then he built the keep with his own hands, stone by stone, year by year, until the forest swallowed him whole. Now he was old. His hair had turned silver, his hands scarred and gnarled. He wore no crown, but only a simple grey cloak and a silver ring on a chain around his neck that one Elara had given him on their wedding day. Every dawn he walked the same path to her grave. He'd sit on a mossy stone and speak to her as if she were still there. "I saw a deer today," he would say. "It had your eyes, gentle, unafraid, or the river is running high. Remember how you loved to swim in it. You said it made you feel alive." The forest would listen. Birds would answer in soft calls, and the wind would rustle the leaves like whispered replies. One winter, when snow blanketed the trees and the cold bit like knives, a stranger came. She was a younger girl of perhaps 16, wrapped in rags, her feet bleeding from the thorns. She stumbled into the clearing where the keep stood, half frozen, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and wonder. Aldrich found her collapsed near the gate. He carried her inside, laid her by the fire, and wrapped her in warm furs. He fed her broth made from roots and venison. When she finally woke, she stared at him as if he were a ghost. "You're the Widow King," she whispered. He offered a small, tired smile. So they say her name was Lyra. She had fled a village to the east after raiders had come. Her family was gone. She had run into the forest and kept running until she could run no more. Aldrich didn't ask her any questions. He simply let her stay. Days turned into weeks. Lyra helped him tend the fire, gather herbs, and repair the crumbling walls. She had a quiet strength, the kind that grows from profound loss. She never spoke of her pain, but her eyes did dark, deep, and full of questions she didn't dare ask. One evening, as they sat by the warmth of the hearth, she broke the silence. "Why do you stay here?" she asked. "You could leave, find another kingdom, be a king again." Aldrich stared into the flames. "I am a king," he said softly, "but I am also a man who lost the only thing that ever mattered. To leave would be to leave her, and I swore I never would." Lyra looked down at her hands. "My mother used to say, love is a wound that never heals. It just stops bleeding." He nodded slowly. She was wise. They sat in silence after that. The fire crackled, and outside wolves howled in the distance. Spring came slowly. The snow melted, and the forest woke from its slumber. Flowers pushed through the earth-teeny white blossoms that Elara had loved. Lyra picked them and placed them on the grave beneath the oak. Aldrich watched from a distance, something softening in his chest. One morning, Lyra found him sitting there, his head bowed. "She would have liked you," he said, without looking up. Lyra knelt beside him. "I wish I had known her." Aldrich reached into his cloak and drew out the silver ring on its chain. He held it out to her. "Take it," he said. "Wear it. Let it remind you that love does not end. It changes shape. It becomes memory. It becomes courage." Lyra's fingers trembled as she took the ring. She slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "I don't know if I can be brave," she whispered. "You already are," he said. "You survived." That summer, Lyra began to sing again. Soft songs her mother had taught her. The forest seemed to listen closer. Birds joined in, and even the trees swayed gently, as if in rhythm. Aldrich listened to, for the first time in decades, the immense weight on his heart felt a little lighter. One night, under a sky full of stars, Lyra asked, "Do you ever think of leaving?" He looked at her. She was no longer the frightened girl who had stumbled into his clearing. She was strong. She was alive. "I think of it every day," he admitted. "But I no longer want to." "Why?" she asked. "Because here," he said, "I am not just a king who lost everything. Here, I am a man who still has something to give." Years passed. The forest grew around them. The keep was repaired, stone by stone. Flowers bloomed where there had once been only thorns. Lyra grew into a woman of quiet power. She never married. She never needed to. She had found a purpose greater than herself. Aldrich grew older still. His steps slowed. His sight dimmed. But every morning he still walked to the grave beneath the oak. Now, Lyra walked with him. One autumn day, when the leaves were gold and red, Aldrich did not rise from his bed. Lyra sat beside him, holding his hand. "Do you hear her?" he asked, his voice faint. Lyra listened. The wind moved through the trees. It was soft, gentle, almost like laughter. "Yes," she whispered. "I hear her." Lyra buried him beside Elara under the same great oak. A single leaf fell and landed on her shoulder. She smiled. "I will keep the stories alive," she said to the wind. And the forest answered, "Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales from Forgotten Realms. We'll see you next time." It was 3:47 a.m. The city outside my window was silent, the kind of silence that feels heavier than noise. I sat in front of the old mirror in my small apartment, the one passed down through generations. Its wooden frame was carved with tiny, faded flowers. I'd stared into it every night for years, searching for something I couldn't quite name. Tonight was different. Tonight, my reflection didn't move in sync with me. When I tilted my head, it waited a heartbeat too long. Then it smiled a slow, knowing smile that wasn't my own. I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The reflection raised a hand and beckoned me closer. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to shatter the glass, to do anything but obey. The glass rippled like the surface of a still pond. I reached out. The moment our fingertips touched, the world flipped inside out. I was falling, tumbling through an endless void before landing on my feet in a city that was black and white. There was no color here, no sound except for the whisper of a soft wind. In the far distance stood a giant mirror, tall as a skyscraper, reflecting nothing but impenetrable darkness. Driven by a compulsion I didn't understand, I walked toward it. My feet sank into the soft ground as if I were walking on ash. I passed a house that looked exactly like mine, but eerily reversed. The windows were on the wrong side. The door opened inward instead of out. Inside, on a familiar table, my laptop glowed with a soft, pale light. The screen displayed a single, chilling sentence. "Why did you come here?" I hadn't even touched the keys to voice. My own voice spoke from directly behind me. "You finally came to meet me." I spun around. He was me. Same height, same tired eyes behind the same smudged glasses, wearing the same faded t-shirt, but his gaze was hollow, like a room where the lights had been turned off for good. "I'm the part you hide," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "The part that's tired of pretending everything is fine. The part that knows you're already halfway gone." He led me through the monochrome streets. As we walked, people began to appear, hundreds of them, all wearing my face. One sat slumped on a bench, staring at a blank phone screen. Another walked in endless circles, never lifting his feet from the ashen ground. They were all me. My regrets, my unspoken fears, the countless versions of myself I had tried so hard to bury. He brought me into a vast, silent hall. In the center, an enormous screen flickered to life, showing my life playing out in reverse. I watched the day I fell in love. But here, she walked away from me. The day I got the promotion I'd worked so hard for, I watched myself quit. The day I yelled at my father in anger, he hugged me tightly instead. Everything that could have been, but never was, paraded before my eyes. Tears burned, hot and sharp. "Why are you showing me this?" I choked out. "Because you're ready to stop running," he said simply. "You stand in front of that mirror every single night and whisper, 'I want out.' But you don't want to leave the pain, you just want the pain to leave you." He pointed toward two identical doors. One, he explained, led back to my room, back to my life as it was. The other led deeper into this colorless world, a permanent stay. "If I go back, nothing changes," I said, the words heavy with resignation. "If you stay, nothing changes either," he replied. "You just stop pretending it ever will." I stared at him, my shadow, the last honest piece of myself. An idea, fragile and uncertain, began to form. "What if we go back together?" He blinked. For the first time since I'd arrived, something flickered in his hollow eyes. It might have been surprise, it might have been hope. "We could try," he said quietly. I held out my hand. He took it, his grip surprisingly firm. Together, we walked back to the mirror that had brought me here. The glass trembled as we approached. We stepped through at the same exact moment. I woke up on the cool wooden floor of my apartment, dawnlight spilling across the room, painting everything in soft, warm colors. I stood up slowly, my joints aching, and turned to face the old mirror. There were two of us, now side by side. Same face, same eyes, but the emptiness that had haunted them was gone. We both smiled, a small, real smile. That morning, I made 2 cups of coffee, one for me, and one for the man who used to live only inside the glass. Outside, the first rain of the day began to fall, washing the city clean.